so crazy, all the coincidences are pretty undeniable. Like, you point out in the documentary how Q posts things that are almost identical to something Trump would post on Twitter 5 minutes later. How would Ron know this kind of stuff? Like, how did Ron essentially, you say, how did he get in connection with Trump and his whole team?
So what you see in the series is that Ron has viz into what's going on behind the scenes with Q. He knew that Q was going to end on the day of the election. It didn't exactly end. There were a couple other drops sort of after that just a small handful that seemed more like cover. But for all intents and purposes, it did end on that day. He and his father both described Q as kind of being a marketing campaign. He would just know things like the Q is going to go on the offense. And then lo and behold, Q says a couple days later, I'm going on the offense. There's a million clues like this, way more than I even put in the series. But at what point did Ron and his father actually get plugged in with, with Trump's inner circle? That's something I'm still interested in figuring out. We know that individuals like General Flynn at least saw the power that Q represented. They got involved fairly early on. Jerome Corsi, who took to Alex Jones, they got involved very early on. So there were sort of a typical cast of players who gravitated towards the power that Q represented. What makes it difficult to parse out the network is that it is decentralized and that people wear different hats online. They use different handles and they communicate in a decentralized fashion. And so, Ron could have been wearing any number of digital hats in communicating with someone from, say, like General Flynn's team or something, or other operators working out of the U.S. who had connections up the food chain. But in terms of actual political power, of seeing when it really seemed to switch, I don't think that happened until 2020. There's that call in the series where I'm on it with Ron and Jason Sullivan and Bill Binney. And Jason Sullivan, he's Roger Stone's head of social media. That indicates that they probably weren't working together prior to that. It sure didn't seem that way on the call. And Jason Sullivan, he's not the biggest player out there, but he had connections to them. Roger Stone was briefly Trump's campaign manager and was an advisor, along the way. And so that's when I think what I describe as, what many describe as sort of meme magic. That's the moment where the sort of fantasy of Q, the sort of LARP, starts to really become real. Just becomes real at that point to some extent. This idea of Q having a relationship to Trump's inner circle, that we get closer to that becoming a kind of reality. And Ron would message me over the course of 2020 saying like, oh, look, I just got retweeted by Flynn or by Trump, or, in order to sort of show, I think, that Q was becoming real. And at least in the one sense of Q having some kind of access to Trump's inner circle, there being some sort of relationship there. And by the time the election rolls around, Ron sort of steps out from his role as the admin of 8kun, and he starts doing publicly on Twitter what he says he was doing privately on 8kun. And he gains followers very quickly. He gains more than 500,000 followers using Jason Sullivan's amplification tool. And Jason Sullivan had one goal on that call. His goal 9 months earlier was to put his amplification tool, his Twitter amplification tool, into Q's hands. Now, on that call, he didn't think Q was necessarily Ron Watkins. He just thought that Ron Watkins would be able to help him get the tool into Q's hands. But it sure seems like Jason Sullivan found his man when he got his amplification tool into Ron's hands. So Ron gained a ton of power on Twitter, He was getting a lot of followers very rapidly. Trump started retweeting him, and then he became the advisor, or one of the advisors, to the election fraud campaign. He gets in touch with Chanel Rion of One American News. Chanel Rion gets hired by Rudy Giuliani to work for them, to work with the Trump campaign. This is all in the deposition that recently just came out on the lawsuit filed by Dominion against Chanel Rion and a handful of other players, Giuliani. So Ron Watkins, who read an election manual or something, is suddenly the election voter fraud guy. There are credible experts who they could have hired for something like this, but he was telling the story that they wanted to hear. And Ron was more than happy to do that. So Ron is the guy who's basically just inventing the narrative that they're running with. I'm sure there were other people advising as well, but we know with certainty that Ron and Chanel, based on what he told me and what you can see publicly, were working together, and that Ron was her primary source on that stuff. So now Ron was really plugged in with the inner circle because he was advising them. And since that time, he's been actively on Telegram, pushing all of the audit stuff. He's doing on Telegram what he had been doing before on 8chan and then 8kun. But little did I know he would try to turn that into real political power by running for Congress. And I think we're going to see more QAnon affiliated candidates, and there's already dozens of them coming into this next election cycle.
Did you see Trump's new social platform that he created, Truth?
Yeah, speak your truth, send out your truth or whatever. Just, but don't say anything bad about Trump. I bet all of that'll get banned on the Truth platform. So,
right. I wonder if Ron Watkins had anything to do with that.
Yeah, I am very curious what the Ron has claimed that he has not in any kind of way been directly communicating with Trump, but that he's like one hop. So did Ron help code that? What's his exact level of involvement with it? I don't know. Would he get involved with it? Probably. But Ron, again, he's born from the Chans. So he's a free speech absolutist. And none of these platforms are free speech absolutists. They all have their respective biases when it comes to moderation, which most people want. Most people don't want to deal with the kind of stuff that gets posted on a site like 8chan, because it's uncomfortable. There's a lot of pretty fucked up things that get posted there, and moderators have to take it down. I mean, they have a huge child porn problem. People post a lot of that crap there. Fred was trying to moderate that, and if that's so. The reality of an absolutist free speech website is that there have to be moderators in place to take down crap like that, and Facebook has the same problem. They have to take down that kind of stuff. But they allow everything on 8chan that's to the limit of free speech, right? That's the absolute max of what's legal. That's what's allowed on 8chan now, 8kun. So of course they're going to take down, like the most fucked up things on the internet that are illegal. Of course they're going to take that down. But it doesn't mean it always gets taken down immediately. And because on 8kun anyone can create their own board, especially in the beginning, they had a problem with boards getting created where people would share that kind of content.